Hey everybody, thanks for watching and thank you for purchasing or downloading this video. Of course, I appreciate you guys' support as always, and I really appreciate you guys supporting me, up until this point. These videos that I put out, on DVD, most of them or almost all of them goes with the Saturn Satan series in some way, shape, or form. But it's just, major parts of the series that I can't fit into the series itself, that I have to make these separate DVDs to go with it so you guys can understand. And you'll see in this DVD, it's a major part of, what's going on in the universe and everything like that. So, I'm glad you guys took the time to purchase it. This topic is something that a lot of people have talked about and asked me about personally, and as far as the series goes. And it's something that, I said that it would go with this series, that I would put it out eventually. Especially pertaining to the rules, because I always talk about in the series there are rules, and you guys are going to understand what that is in this video. You're going to understand what that all means. So now, I want you guys for a second to just basically, clear your head of everything you have been taught, for a second, if you can do that, if it's possible. Just clear your head, and I want you to think about where you are, relative to the sun, the moon, and the stars. Just think about where you are at in your room, in your living room, or what have you, where you stand or sit relative to the sun, the moon, and the stars. You probably can see the sun right now. You probably can see the moon. This is where you are. So I want you to just go back and, think about the ancients who basically used common sense. They looked up and they seen the sun, felt the power of the sun. They seen the moon, and they know the moon came out, when it was dark. So they understood that whatever they were standing on probably resembles the sun and the moon. And they understood that, the earth has to be, floating there in outer space, just like the sun and the moon, that they can look up and see. And remember, there are also about 5 planets that you can see with the naked eye. So they can see these things and see that, what we are standing on, that we call Earth or whatever they called it, is possibly the same thing. So again, they use common sense. So you walk the earth for however many years. You have never seen the earth produce a human being, produce an animal. What you know for sure, for certain, is that you come from your mother. Your mother had you, and everybody else came from a woman, a female. Animals come from animals, or what have you. So we know that this earth, this planet that we sitting on, this massive rock, does not produce humans or animals. So that being said, that being the case, of course, obviously, we had to be placed here. And this is what they realized. They say, you know what? Something put us here because we don't come from here. And this is what you got to understand. So them back then, not having to worry about, paying bills, not having to worry about, what time Walking Dead comes on, or how a person was killed, or who was killed on Walking Dead, and stupid stuff like that. They had the time to sit and ponder that very thing. And they looked up out into the heavens and they said to themselves, what the fuck is out there? What is going on? Something put us here. That's for a fact. You have to understand, and it's something I waited to this point to really get into and try to pound into people's head, because we talk about this and we touch on it and people put out YouTube videos, but I don't think people really get it based off of what I just said. We are the extraterrestrials. We are not native to this planet. That is a fact. We do not come from here. I mean, I don't understand how people don't see that, because, we have been completely brainwashed and bombarded with so much stuff that we cannot see that obvious fact that we don't come from here based on what I just spoke on. The planet, no matter how long it sits, will not grow human beings. Think about that. So we have been placed here by who, by what, we'll probably get into that. But This is what they pondered and they thought about for centuries. And they looked out into the heavens and, the universe, space, and, and they saw things and they knew they had to catalog it. So now, of course, those who were, intelligent enough to comprehend the ramifications or to comprehend basically the implications of us being placed on this earth, they watched the heavens because they felt like, well, I need to see what the hell is out there just in case whoever put us here comes back. I mean, think about that. When you get that realization, that understanding that you have been put here, you're going to watch to see, who comes back or what's going on out there, because, it's like you putting a fish in a fish tank and, the fish is in a tank and maybe it has the knowledge that it came from somewhere else and maybe it came from a pet store, but it does know that it can see outside of its tank and it can see that it's stuff out there and that it was placed there. Even if it died and had offspring somehow, like another fish was put in there and they had, two fish or whatever, the fish who come later would still be able to see that, well, wait a minute, we are inside of a tank. So of course they could see that we were placed on the earth. So they had to think that, this was something that was done for a reason, and they needed to understand that reason. Now, a lot of people laugh and we joke about UFOs and extraterrestrials and stuff like that. And people don't realize that, as I said, we are the extraterrestrials. We have been placed here. And, this planet exists in a part of the universe that basically supports and creates matter. It's basically what it is, This planet is in a low vibratory section of the universe that creates and supports matter. That's like my own conclusion that I've come to. And I feel like, if it's conscious, it has the ability to either become matter or not. But if it's not conscious, it will take the form of matter. And since the universe, which we'll get into, is basically infinite, I mean, the possibilities of what could be going on here is endless when you really start to get into it and think about it. But I mean, at that basic beginner level. Now, understand when I talk about beginner, I'm talking about the people who came up out of this catastrophe, the people who came up out of whatever event took place that basically destroyed most of the planet and caused people to live underground and stuff like that. Remember, when they came back out, the so-called cavemen, when they came back out, or the earth dwellers or whatever you want to call them, when they came back out, they really had no knowledge of what the hell happened. Few civilizations had knowledge of things that took place prior. And we see that as being evident in the Egyptian civilizations, which is why everybody came into Egypt to learn, because for some reason it seemed like they knew, what happened. So when you look at the fact that the position and placement of the earth is so perfect as far as the aspect of, creating life, something that impossible has to be done on purpose. When you look at the fact that, during an eclipse, a total eclipse, that the moon basically covers up the sun as to appear as if, it's larger than the sun or the same size as the sun, when we know that the sun is about 400 times the size of the moon. So, this is something that you have to look at as being, something that is purposely done, that has a reason behind it. You can't leave it up to chance when you look into space and you see so much going on, that these things happen within the heavens, at these certain dates and times. This is some kind of, divine order or some kind of purpose. It's a reason for this stuff. And this is how it was looked at by the ancients. They could look at these things. They study the stars because they knew, something placed us here. I mean, you can go to the deepest microscopic view of everything on this planet. You will not find human beings at that level. So again, we didn't come from this planet. This planet did not create us. And by that definition alone, by that fact, everybody has to wake up and snap out of the bullshit and see for a fact. I mean, it's damn near common sense. Obviously, something put us here. And, this is what they really wanted to get to the bottom of. Now, there are many civilizations who speak about, coming from the stars or beings coming from the stars. Now, if you're looking out there and you believe that's where you come from, in order for you to understand, where you come from and your purpose on this planet, then you must first study the stars. So, of course, when you look out there, what do you see? They seen the constellations, they seen the stars, they seen the 5 planets that's visible to the naked eye. You see the sun, of course, you see the moon. So, we have basically 88 constellations that we know of. Now, we also know that 12 of those constellations, basically our sun, the planets, and the moon go through these 12 constellations, the zodiac. So this is stuff that you could see, and calculate. And this is what the ancients did. They took note of these things. They took note that the sun passed through a certain constellation, during a certain time. The same thing with the sun and the planets. So they calculated this stuff because, of course, if you believe that you come from space, you are paying attention to what's out there because it's so much stuff. Have you ever been to a place or a country where at night, I remember out to sea when I was in the Navy, sometimes being on a boat was to go to the flight deck at night. And when you look up, it's almost like being on a spaceship in outer space because the stars and everything's it's so clear out at sea. You can see everything. It looks crazy. It's a crazy view that a lot of people don't get a chance to see. And I can imagine back then that, they probably seen the universe the same way, and it probably was amazing to them, and they probably seen stuff flying back and forth and, what have you. So, they paid attention, they cataloged this stuff, and they wrote it down over the years, over thousands of years. So, of course, when you notice things like when the sun is in this constellation, it's colder here or it's warmer here, you take note of this kind of stuff. So, of course, over time, as you're paying attention, you will notice things like when the sun is in this constellation, that we have winter or we have summer or the leaves start to die, things of that nature. So, of course, you will look at the stars as somehow, controlling what takes place on the planet. And this is how a lot of the, you can call them primitives or, the ancients looked at things like when this constellation appears, we don't see the buffalo no more. So food is scarce or things don't grow. So, of course, to them, not having the same kind of mindset that we have, they looked at this stuff as, gods, and they deified the constellations. And, different civilizations saw different things. They deified them based upon the actions or the animals or whatever it looked like to them, which is why a lot of different civilizations have different constellations. We don't have the rat like the Chinese do. So different constellations meant different things to different civilizations, different groups of people. And when you understand the culture, you can understand why they use a lot of the animals and things that they do. But, so they deified these things. And a lot of people, I'm not going to say it was worship. It was just so much as taking notice of what they seen in the heavens. And, we look at stuff as, worship and this and that. It's not, the same to them. Of course, if this constellation is bringing abundance of life or food to my people, then of course I'm going to celebrate every time the sun is in its constellation, so on and so forth. And this is what the ancients did, and they cataloged this stuff. And this stuff is ancient, it's old, and it goes back, very, very far. The understanding of one that the sun did move and land in certain constellations as well as the moon and the other 5 planets visible to the naked eye. Just to know that and to have the the mindset to calculate this stuff and to take note of this. And you're gonna find out later why and how. So they did this. This is what the ancients did. And this right here, when you get into astrology or astronomy, this is basically the basis for all religion, across the world. You're going to see that in this video. And that's basically what they did. They deified the constellations and made up stories, and they basically taught with pictures. It was easier this way. We know the ancient Egyptians did the same. They taught with pictures. And it's, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A lot of people say that, but it's easier for you to remember a picture versus, a long word. If I'd rather show you a picture of a rhinoceros than have you remember the word rhinoceros. You know what I'm saying? So it's just easier for you to see that picture, for you to immediately associate that rhinoceros with whatever it does. And this is what they did with the constellations, so people could understand. And it was easier for them to teach it, to the kids. So now, and them looking up into the heavens at the moon and the planets and the sun, of course, the sun would be the most revered, because without the sun, everything dies. All life basically in the universe, in the solar system, I should say, basically dies without the sun, and any life that is. So, the sun was the most revered. It was deified the most, through the civilizations around the world. And, you might had a different name for the sun, depending on where it appeared, as far as the constellations in the north and the south. If it appeared in the north, it might have been cold. So the sun to you might have represented, a cold god or something like that during that time in the north. In the south, it might be warm. So maybe a warm god. It might represent a different god during that time in the south. So now the thing is, every 11 and a half years, due to the rotation of the sun, we get sunspotting. Now, the thing is, when these sunspots begin to form, at first glance, it takes on the form of a winged serpent. So basically a serpent with wings, or this is where you see in Kemet, you see it a lot, the winged sun disk or the winged serpent. This is where all this comes from. We're talking about the appearance of sunspots every 11 and a half years. And the first sight of these sunspots takes on the appearance of a winged serpent. So now when you go down to Mexico and you see the pyramid of the flying serpent, and you can see that, they must have took this stuff seriously, or else they wouldn't have built such a, large temple, to the deity, to the snake deity. And, this is something that a lot of people go down to see in Mexico. And I'm going to explain later. I want to get into it right now. But, things like this is what the ancients saw, and they deified all this stuff, because to them, you got to really take your mindset off of, today and think about back then, a primitive civilization. Not really primitive though. And really spiritual. And that's something I'm going to get into that, we have lost today that they had. You're going to understand what that is. So, they looked at this stuff and it's something to them. So they build the pyramid. The simple fact that they built it is something that you should be in awe of. And I'm going to get into a while later. This stuff gets deep. This is one of my more deeper videos. I want you guys to really get this information, because it's going to make a lot of sense. Now, we know that the winged sun disk is basically an aspect of Ra. So we can see that in the Olmecs, or down in Mexico, the Aztecs, whatever they want to say, whatever they want to call them, is basically, they have their sun gods as well as the Egyptians. So we know about Quetzalcoatl, who is basically the winged serpent. And when you go down to Chichen Itza in Mexico, and of course they have the pyramid down there as well. Now, as I was saying before, all of this, now remember, we're talking about astrology here. We're talking about the sun. This is the sun. A lot of people may think, well, they crazy for spending all them hours building that huge pyramid for, just because sunspots look like a winged serpent. It sounds crazy. It's going to make a lot of sense later. But, as I said, this stuff is the basis of religion. This is where all this stuff comes from. When you look at it, you can find it everywhere. Whenever you find something that's ancient, that has an ancient story attached to it, I guarantee you're going to look in the Bible, the Quran, or Torah, and you're going to find a similar story, or somebody trying to rip it off. And it has to always do with religion. So you have Quetzalcoatl, which is the winged serpent that is basically speaking about the sun. And what a lot of people don't realize is the Mormons believe that Quetzalcoatl is basically the resurrected Jesus Christ. And yes, they actually believe this. So they believe that Jesus basically was in America, and he came and appeared and talked to the neophytes, who they believe were some Indians, the Hopewell Indians. They believe they were the Hopewell Indians. So when you read Third Neophyte or Nephi in the Book of Mormon, something we have not touched on in any of my videos, the Book of Mormon and some of these other weird religions, which I'm going to start touching on a little bit more so you can see the fuckery, the foolery, that's in a lot of this stuff and where it comes from. So when you read in Third Neophyte, I'm just going to read 12 and 13, just so you can understand. So it says, Jesus calls the 12 disciples. He delivers to the neophytes a discourse similar to the Sermon on the Mount. He speaks the Beatitudes, which basically is like grace or the benediction. He speaks the Beatitudes. His teachings transcend and take precedence over the law of Moses. Men are commanded to be perfect, even as he and his Father are perfect. 13 says, Jesus teaches the neophytes the Lord's Prayer. They are to lay up treasures in heaven. The 12 disciples and their ministry are commanded to take no thought for temporal things. Now, I want you to pay attention. You see the little video before Jesus coming down talking to the people, but I want you to pay attention to what he's walking down. I mean, take a look. Now you can see it's a pyramid, and it's basically shaped just like the pyramid in Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl, the serpent of the sun, or the sun serpent, or the winged serpent. So we know what Jesus is the sun. So Jesus, they're basically telling you in the Book of Mormon, Jesus is the Son. So here you have Jesus coming down the pyramid, and it's representing Quetzalcoatl, who represents the winged serpent that represents the sunspots that basically is talking about the sun. So it all goes back to the sun. So I want you to understand what we're dealing with here. And you're going to find this a lot. We're going to see this a lot throughout the video. That, as I said, when you start going back and looking at a lot of these stories, these ancient stories, they deal with astrology and have mythological stories and stuff like that. You're going to find Christianity or some religion ripping it off. And you can see just the example here that, they're saying that Jesus is Quetzalcoatl, but they're basically trying to tell you that Jesus is the Son, which we already know that. So now I wanted to read those two verses in the Book of Mormon so that you could understand what we're dealing with here and what they have done and what they will go through to push this story. I mean, you have a video there that somebody made of these people walking up to Jesus. You talking about the simple fact that they wrote the Book of Mormon and all the stories that surround Jesus Christ and all these deities. I mean, the links that they went through to sell you on these stories is huge. I mean, these stories are filled with people and all kinds of, actions that they go through, things that they face, trials and tribulations, all surrounding the fact that they're only talking about the Son. I mean, this is what they went through. And when you understand this and you look through it and see that, don't get caught up in the story. As I said, like in an old video, don't get caught up in the story. The story is there to give you a message. If you get caught up in the story and the beauty of it and the hope or whatever it entails, you're going to miss the message. The message is there. It's trying to tell you something outright. Now, for anybody who knew about the Chichen Itza and Quetzalcoatl and everything like that and understand what it pertains to and see that it's talking about the Son, it's easy for you to make that connection of Jesus and the Son. So when we talk about the whole winged sun disk, a winged sun disk, we know we found it in Kemet. But then when we look at Malachi 4:2, it says here, but unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness, Son, S-U-N, of righteousness arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. Now, the Bible is replete with astrology. You got to understand that. We know the Old Testament is basically Greek mythology or Greek astrology, basically, that they basically stole stories from, Kemet. The whole Greek mythology, when you look at it, it's talking about the planets, Hercules and everything like this. We know where it comes from, Pandora's box, Eve and the apple, Noah's Ark, Deucalion and Pharaoh, Zeus, Jesus, so on and so forth, Samson, Hercules. We know where it comes from. So you can look at that clear and see, what it's talking about and where they ripped it off from. It's obvious to a lot of people when you look at the Old Testament, that's basically, where it all comes from. So as I was saying before about the whole Genesis 1:7, the firmament. I mean, again, when you look at Genesis, you could just see the clear plagiarism. Soon as you open the book, boom, right in your face. Plagiarized. So Genesis 1:7 talking about the firmament, the waters above the firmament and below the firmament. As I talked about, we know they're talking about the waters of Noom and that they stole that from the ancient Egyptian creation story. It's all plagiarism. It's plagiarized. And we know Greek mythology is all in the Old Testament. But, what about the New Testament? Okay, so again, we look at Virgo. We look at the constellation Virgo. What you have is you have the movement of the sun. And what it does is it comes into the constellation Virgo. And as it's coming into, following its rotation into the constellation Virgo, you have, when it makes contact, it looking like Virgo, the Virgin, being pregnant. Now, as the sun continues its course, you have the sun coming out basically between the legs of Virgo, having it seem as if, a virgin birth, has been done. So you have Virgo giving birth to the sun. And that's all basically it is. Virgo giving birth to the sun, Virgo the virgin, you have a virgin birth. It's all astrology. This is where the shit comes from. And it's crazy that when you look at the cycle and you see this being done, you can see clearly where they got the concept of a virgin birth. Now, when we read Revelations 12, it's talking about this. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Again, we have Virgo. When you look at Virgo, you have at the bottom of her foot, you can see clearly the moon and its rotation going through its cycle at the foot of Virgo. You can see Virgo being bathed with the sun. This is all talking about the constellations, talking about what's happening in the universe. You can see over top of her head, Leo. Leo can be considered the 12-starred crown that they're referring to, but there are also 12 stars, above her head. So we can consider Leo being the crown that it's talking about. So again, when you look at this stuff, astronomy, astrology, it's all stuff they got from the heavens. As I said, this is where this stuff comes from, and this is the basis of modern day religion. And same thing with Revelation 6. When you look at Revelation 6, it says, it's talking about the seals being open. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow. Now, that's basically talking about, and that one is pretty clear that it's Sagittarius because of the bow. So it's easy stuff. When you pay attention, you can see what the stuff is really talking about. So now we can do this basically all day and go through stories or constellations and find stories in the Bible that parallel, that we can see that they clearly stole from an ancient story that deals with astrology or an ancient story from an ancient civilization. We see this all the time. And it leads to common misconceptions. It leads to problems and issues with a lot of symbols and, what the constellations itself. Some people say, oh, don't touch that constellation stuff. Don't trust that astrology. It's the devil. Oh, that's the devil's math and stuff like that, because people have no clue what it's talking about. Because, of course, the Bible would steer you away from stuff like that, from understanding the stars. Because if you understood this stuff, then you can completely debunk the Bible and see what it's really talking about. So another symbol of, a lot of controversy is this. A lot of people see this symbol and they think immediately of Satan, the seal of Satan, witchcraft, conjuring demons and stuff like that, what have you. But now this is Venus. That's all it is. This is Venus, the day star. Venus appears as the morning star in the eastern sky, before sunrise. It's basically all it is. It's the only time you can really see Venus is during this time. So now what happens is every 8 years, what people don't realize, every 8 years, Venus takes this course and makes basically this pattern, which we see as the star, the day star, Lucifer, the son of the morning. This is all it's talking about when you look at the Bible and you talk about this stuff and you read this stuff. This is what they're using, what they're talking about. It's all going back to astrology. It's all going back to the ancients and their calculations on what they saw. People never really got that whole separation of Lucifer and Satan. And when you understand, we're talking about, celestial bodies here. We're talking about planets, amazing, beautiful stuff that has nothing to do with people perceive as evil or demonic or what have you, based upon whatever movie that they watch. This is something that exists in nature and reality. It's been here long before any of us. It has been going on. So every 8 years, Venus takes this course. It makes this pattern. It has been doing it for a very long time. And a lot of people get confused about it because they don't know. They don't want to take the time. That whole phrase of people being willfully ignorant is so true. And, I can't really blame too many people, because when you get bombarded with this stuff in movies and in church, it's tough to deal with. As I said, I bit that bullet years ago where I had to really dig and dive into Satanism and witchcraft and everything like that and learn it and study it, to study Crowley and study all the people who was considered to be evil, wicked people and what they was talking about. And, the things that they have was said to have done. And, you have to really understand that, as I talk about, these people have to be portrayed as such, because if you understood what they were doing, you would understand the power of the powers that be, which we'll get into. So, of course, anything pertaining to voodoo and witchcraft, which is why I made the DVD, and to this kind of stuff, which is why I make this DVD, as far as astrology, astronomy, or what have you, they don't want you touching it. They damn sure don't want you to know the real truth about it, which is what we're going to get into in this video. So now let's get into this thing real quick. Now, after the ancient Egyptians was conquered, after the Greeks came into Kemet and started getting the information. Now, remember, the Greeks had good relations with the ancient Egyptians. They came in there. Remember, the Egyptians taught everybody, taught the Romans, taught the Asians, taught a lot of people. A lot of people came in Kemet to Kemet to get the information. Now, there were some things that they kept, of course, in the Egyptian mystery schools to themselves. There's knowledge that they kept. So we know that Thales, people like Pythagoras they were in these mystery schools in Kemet. So they learned this information. Now, after the ancient Egyptians was defeated and the Greeks had basically full reign and full control of the knowledge and the information that was in Kemet, they gained the knowledge of basically reality, the essence of what the ancient Egyptians was trying to achieve. They got that knowledge. And we know that they got that knowledge because they put it in their building, which, I'll explain in a moment. But you have to realize that the universal language, the universal knowledge, what they taught in the mystery schools, the sacred math, sacred geometry, or sacred science. This is what it's all about. And math is the language of the universe, whether you realize that or not. And this is what it's really all about. And this is basically the premise, the main thing we're going to get into in this video, math. And a lot of people don't realize how deep this is. Everything is math. When you look out into the universe, it's math. It exists. It's all over the place. Now, in order for you to really grasp this, to understand this, you have to just think about nothing, right? You have basically this space right here. This space right here is just empty space. If it went on forever, it cannot be calculated really, because it's just space. Until you put something there, you can't really get math. But as soon as something exists, soon as a piece of matter exists, math is everywhere. And let me tell you why. Because from this point now to, let's say I go from the point at the tip of my finger out 20 yards, you have math. You got a distance of 20 yards. So now everything that's in this, emptiness is basically going to be relative to this one point. So you had nothing. If I go like this, now we have basically 12 inches right now. We have math. It exists. So if I go, put this here, now I put my finger here, we have math. We have 12 inches that's relative to this statue. So you get what I'm saying? Since there is matter that exists in this part of the universe, everything is math because everything is relative to something. So in that relativity exists math. There's no way around it. It is the universal language. It's everywhere. We have math. There's no way around that. So they understood this. And what is killer is how we find the patterns of math in so many things. And it's like almost looking at everything and seeing that, it's made up of atoms. Then you say, well, but we all the same thing. We all matter. We all made up of atoms or what have you. But when you look at the math of the universe, as far as the relativity to things and the math that it consists of, it's mind-boggling. And it shows you that there is a creator, a grand architect, because there's no way that this stuff could be a coincidence. So a lot of you have heard about the whole Fibonacci spiral, the Fibonacci sequence, the sequence of numbers that goes 1, 1, 2, 1 and 2 is 3, 2 and 3 is 5, 3 and 5 is 8, and so on and so forth. So this is the whole Fibonacci sequence, and we find this in almost everything in reality, all throughout, the world and the universe and itself and galaxies. So now he also talked about the golden number or the golden ratio, which they call the divine proportion, which basically guides matter and the movement of energy in the universe. We can find it in our DNA. We can find it in the proportion of our bodies. Now we also have pi. Now pi is basically the circumference of a circle and its diameter. So we're basically talking about the distance around a circle and the distance, in the middle of a circle. Now, why are these things important? These are things that we find replete throughout reality and nature everywhere. I mean, we just find these numbers and we find that they match up so perfectly as to the point where it has to be studied. You can't just, brush it off as a coincidence. It's important that we study this stuff because, basically if I build a doghouse and I build a doghouse relative to the max measurement of a dog. Now, let's say that when you first got the dog, it's a puppy. Now, for some reason, I knew how big the dog would eventually get, right? Before it got that big. It's a puppy now. So I built this doghouse, right? And when I build it to the exact specifications of the puppy when it will get full size. So when you see the doghouse is like huge. The proportions is perfect. And eventually when a dog grows up, it fits perfectly within a doghouse. And it's like, wow. When you see something like that, you would say, well, somebody did a great job. Somebody did a perfect job. They knew exactly what they was doing. They understood that this dog would grow to this height, this weight, this proportion, that they designed the doghouse to fit this dog. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the earth and the universe. It is divinely inspired, divinely created, and it is so perfectly done as far as math.